Fantastic. Stuart, thank you so much for coming today. So, what can you tell us about Scotland's butterflies?
Okay, so hello everyone. My name's Stuart Benz. So I'm one of the volunteers for the Glasgow Southwest branch of butterfly conservation. So butterfly conservation is found across the whole of the UK. There's three kind of branches in Scotland that are volunteer run, but there's also a large team of staff that back that as well. And we do lots of things to conserve rare butterflies and moths, and even a lot of the common ones, which are becoming rarer. So we do a lot to look after them, to raise awareness about them. But actually, in doing so, so many other species rely on them. We actually help conserve lots of nature and wildlife. And Kirsty asked me at the beginning there, how did I get into this? And asked if I would kind of share how I got into this. So I started, my gran was always into the outdoors, and from a very young age got me into it and got me very excited to be out in the outdoors. And she had a huge big buddleia bush in the back garden, lots and lots of butterflies flying to it. And I think that's where I fell in love with nature and wildlife. I then went on, I actually started looking at plants more and doing botany and looking at all the different types of plants and how they work and how they grow. But at some point in that, I started to get more interested in the insects that visit the plants and feed on the plants. So that's when I started to get really into butterflies and moths because they feed on the plant in two different bits as a butterfly as an adult, but also as a caterpillar. And I got really into them from there. I studied conservation at university, and I did my master's degree in similar, and then I did a PhD in moths and butterflies and forestry. And as I say, I'm a volunteer doing this, but I work for Nature Scotland's nature agency by day, and do it as well. So, but where I get to work with lots of different types of wildlife, but my favourites always come back to the insects, particularly the moths and the butterflies. So you will see there's a few wee sneak-ins to the moths in here as well. The moths get a little bit underrated. So I've sneaked them in with the butterflies. So if I can get my slides to change. There we go. So this is all of our Scottish butterflies. And most people don't think we have as many as this. There's 34. Hopefully, I didn't miss any. There should be 34 little pictures there. And that is all of our butterflies in Scotland. There's 58 in the UK in all. We get the odd rare migrant that comes in as well. There's things like the Camberwell beauty butterfly, which is huge. That is bigger than anything else, probably by about twice. I've only ever seen it in Germany, and it's a huge big butterfly. We occasionally get them coming in, one called clouded yellow. It's a very big yellow butterfly. I mean, sometimes get the monarchs as well. Sometimes those are released by people. Sometimes they have actually got lost from North America and they come and visit, especially the west coast of Scotland. They get very lost. So this is a whole range of the different species, and you can see they come in literally all shapes, sizes, and colours. You've got things like this one in the top corner. If I'll try and make my pointer a little bit clearer. So you've got this one up here. This is a checkered skipper. It was just re-released down south, but it was only found in a small area of the west coast of Scotland. And these are sort of the link between the butterflies and the moths. And you can see they look a bit moth-like. There's another one here. This is a small skipper, dingy skipper and large. So you can see these look a wee bit moth-like. And then you've got the more traditional butterflies that you might see in your garden most often. You've got things like the red admiral and the peacock, and the small tortoiseshell down here. But you also have things like the fritillaries. The purple hair streak I had at the start, very common butterfly, and I guaranteed in the last month, all of you have probably walked under. Probably a good few of them, I would say. And I'll talk a bit more about them later. People don't know they're there. Unless you spend a lot of time looking upwards, you'll never see them. We've also got exciting things happening in Scotland, like this white letter hair streak only just coming to Scotland the last couple of years. So we are getting new butterflies with climate change. We've also got some that are struggling from climate change as well. So as I say, 58 butterflies in the UK, 34 in Scotland, but that number is going up. Let's see if we can get my slides are taking forever to change. There we go. So why are they important? Why are butterflies and actually moths important? They both play a very, very similar role. The number one thing is food. Other things eat them, and other things eat them in a big way. So we've got a blue-tit nest here. Blue-tit nest can go between 10 and 15,000 caterpillars. If you're a bird, if you when we're giving children drinks, you can go and give them a glass of juice or something. Bird can't do that for its family, so its water bottle is a caterpillar. Caterpillars are mostly water, so when it needs to give the chicks a drink, it gives them a caterpillar. And they're also full of nice vitamins and everything as well. So a lot of it's actually moths rather than butterflies. But if a butterfly caterpillar walks in front of a blue tit, it will get eaten and it will end up being going to feed the chicks. But blue tits will actually even time when their nests come out the emergence of certain moth caterpillars because they know they can't survive without them. They're key for nutrient cycling. What I mean by this is they actually go up into trees and eat all the leaves, eat lots of foliage and in other plants too. And then they concentrate up all the really important nutrients. A lot of them they don't really need, or there's too many of them for them. Concentrate them all up, and then it's in their droppings. And their droppings go back to the forest floor, back to the soil, and help fertilize the soil and make the soil very healthy for other things to be able to grow and live. So they're very important for kind of cycling these nutrients. They are a key pollinator. There's a lot of plants that can only be pollinated by some butterflies and moths. They're very good at doing strawberries. Now, strawberry flower is actually lots of different flowers. So each little yellow dot in the middle is actually technically its own little flower. And for you to get a nice strawberry, the fruit has to form around each flower. And you can see where each flower was because that's where the seeds are on the outside of the strawberry. So to get a nice round strawberry that doesn't get any fungus or doesn't start to rot or anything is a nice shape. You need really good pollinators. And that's what moths and butterflies can do. So they're very, very important to us in lots of ways and for lots of wild plants as well. They're really good environmental indicators. So what I mean by this is that they tend to only live 1 year. To go from egg to caterpillar to a pupae or a chrysalis to an adult tends to take about 1 year. And because of that, sometimes they can do it multiple times in a year, sometimes even 3 times in a year. And because of this, they change the things really quickly. They evolve to suit their environment. In other species, like a lot of mammal species and stuff, you might be looking for 10 years before that'll happen. Even things like the blue tits, it might be 3 years, 4 years. So it's a lot slower change, whereas butterflies can change within a couple of years really fast to adapt to their environment. And also their numbers will go up and down really quickly. So that can tell us lots about how the climate's changing, how a certain bit of habitat's changing, and things are changing in a certain area. So they act as an indicator. And if we see bad things happening to them, we can normally go, oh, hang on, we've got to be careful here because everything else is going to start going downhill. What's going on? Let's do something about it quickly before it gets that bad. So key for monitoring climate change as well. But I also like to think they're very key for our well-being as well. I'm dyslexic, autistic myself, and one of the really key things for me is to be able to get out, experience it outdoors, especially if it's been a bit stressful and stuff. It's really important for me to be able to get out, going outdoors. There's nothing that raises my mood more than seeing a moth or a butterfly about. I think it's one of the other key reasons that I'm into them. And I think that's something I learned from very young. And I think a lot of people will have that. So imagine a world without any butterflies. It would be really, really sad. So this is one of the reasons they're so important. And I will talk about their conservation, but I'm going to introduce you to some of the butterfly species around Scotland. But before doing that, what I'm just going to do is go a wee bit over the life cycle. Now, most of you will have seen this and maybe spoke to children about it and all sorts, but it's really important. It's actually slightly different for a lot of species. So I've chosen the orange tip butterfly. This one was some of the names you just can't work out where they got the name from. But this one, orange tip, I think we can see where it got its name, luckily. They lay this nice orange egg, which you can actually find on the plant cuckoo flower. If I can get it to come up. There we are. So there's a cuckoo flower. And if you look where my red pointer is there, that's where the butterfly lays its eggs. So in early spring, you'll see these plants usually coming up in damp bits of grass. And if you have a look around, you can quite often find the egg. It's quite big, so you can quite often find it. So it hatches out, that one in early spring. It feeds as a caterpillar and then overwinters normally as a pupae, and then it comes out as an adult. Other ones overwinter as a caterpillar, some overwinter as an egg, some overwinter as an adult. So it's very different depending on what butterfly you are, at what point you overwinter, how much you feed before the winter, how much you have to feed after the winter. Some of these chrysalisks will be above ground in vegetation, some it'll be inside stems, some it'll be deep underground even. There's one moth that can go even called the rannoch sprawler that we think goes over a meter underground and keeps well out the way of anything that might affect it by it turns into from a caterpillar into an adult. So the life cycle is very important, and when we're looking to help butterflies and moths, we need to kind of keep that in mind because we need to make sure we've got the food for the caterpillar. So the food for this one being the cuckoo flower, so the caterpillar will eat that. But that's not necessarily what the adult takes the nectar off. The adult will take the nectar off a lot of other plants. So we need to make sure there's nectar for the adults. But we also need to make sure there's places for the chrysalisks who won't be disturbed over the winter as well. So we need to be very careful that we provide all of these things when we're talking about butterflies and moths. And people often will say to me, why don't I see them in my garden? And the reason a lot of the time we're not seeing them in their garden is because one of these things is missing. And we can actually see that with some of the next species. So I think I showed this way as well. This is what the underside of the orange tip looks like. The female orange tip actually doesn't have the orange tips. It's just white on top, but they all have this amazing green-white checkerboard-like pattern underneath the wings. So some of our butterflies. So you might know these ones in about your garden. The top one is the peacock butterfly. Now, this is all butterflies and moths will have some form of an eye on the wing. This one's a very obvious couple of eyes on the wings, but the small tortoiseshell, sometimes this bit looks like an eye, sometimes these wee dots look like an eye. And some moths, it's just a single black or white dot. And that whole idea is a bird will come along, and the last thing you want if you're a moth or a butterfly is for a bird to bite your head off. That doesn't end very well. But if it bites a little bit out your wing, it doesn't really matter. Butterflies can fly with about 2/3 of their wing missing. They don't fly very well, but they can still fly. They tend to, rather than fly nice and straight, they tend to tumble through the air when they get to that point. But they still make a good attempt to fly. So they can do with a lot of wing damage. So they're basically trying to say to a predator, the first thing is look at my big eyes and look how far apart they are. I must have a very big mouth in between those eyes. If you come to try and eat me, I might eat you, so maybe leave me alone. And if that doesn't work, they then go, well, I'll tell you what, go and peck my head. You've just pecked my wing, I'll go and fly away now. So it's all to trick predators, and they all have it. And actually, these two butterflies, they have almost like little bits of Velcro in their wings, and they hibernate in dark places, in caves. And if you go into an old castle and have a look up the chimney, especially the chimney's got a bend in it, you'll often find hundreds of them crammed in the chimney, and they're all just hibernating there. And they have these wee Velcro pads, and if a mouse or something tries to sneak up on them, they open the Velcro, and it makes this noise that we can hardly hear. But there's some brilliant videos on YouTube that show scientists putting a chicken in a dark room with a butterfly, and the butterfly just opens its wing, and the chicken launches into midair and goes and hides at the far side of the room. Finds it absolutely terrifying. Goodness knows what it sounds like, but it's just this little sound the wings make when they open. So they've got all these wonderful little defenses. But these are two of our should be our most common butterflies. I've seen less than 20 peacocks this year. I've seen 8 small tortoiseshells. They're in a really bad way. This year's been one of the worst years I've ever had. They all feed on nettles. Their caterpillars feed on nettles. So when people say, "Why haven't I got them in my garden?" the kind of first answer usually is, "Are there any nettles in your garden?" Most, well, of course there's not nettles in my garden. Why would I have nettles in your garden? Well, unfortunately, that's what the cat. No nettles, none of these butterflies, unfortunately. So it's always, and you'll hear me say it for other things throughout this. It's always good to have a wild space in your garden, a wee wild patch, because even if it's a square meter, even if it's quite small, because it provides the caterpillar food plants for these. And unfortunately, those big kind of characteristic colourful butterflies we expect in our gardens, they almost all feed on nettles. Other butterflies do feed a whole load of plants, but those ones we recognise, they all feed on stinging nettles. So nettles are very, very important. We don't have nettles, we don't have them. They must have a place to hibernate and they must have a good supply of nectar as well. So like a log pile or something to hibernate in, or a rocky wall. Sometimes you see them going into wee holes in dry stone dikes and that sort of thing. But they've got to have somewhere with it out of the frost and can have stable temperature to last the winter. Unfortunately, they don't survive. So it's very important. As I put in some numbers. Their abundance has dropped. This is their overall numbers has gone down by 3%. But what they call the distribution, this is the number of little dots that they were found in. So this is since 1970. The number of little dots that they're found in has gone down 36% for the peacock, 79% for the small tortoiseshell. So over three quarters gone. And you can see in the north of Scotland, you can see there's ones that have now not been there for quite a while, and all these little circles have gone white because they've not been seen. So we're seeing a massive decline in something that should be one of our more common butterflies, unfortunately. So we've then got things like the red admiral. So this is the top one again, feeds on nettles, though it does feed on some other plants as well. And funnily enough, it's doing a bit better. But it also migrates. So if we have a very warm spring, and if Europe's having quite a bad spring, they will go, yeah, you know what? I'm not hanging around here. The weather's terrible. There's no flowers to feed on. I'm coming to Britain. And usually it's, I'm coming to Scotland. So they'll come up to Scotland, they'll stop and they'll drink lots of nectar. And at this time of year, I live in the Fife Coast, and there's loads of them coming into Fife at the moment. And that's migrating up in the warm air currents from Europe. And they're all looking for a place to top up and get a bit of nectar before they have to overwinter, to getting all those energy reserves topped up. So their numbers have went up by 234%, but a lot of that's the migratory ones. They're maybe not breeding as well as that in the UK, but there's certainly a lot of them coming in and then doing very well as migrants. And then they're doing well the following year. So they're doing a bit better, and they're in more places as well. Painted Lady is the same, and the Painted Lady hasn't come in good numbers this year, but it's another one. This one's it starts just across from the Sahara, just north of the Sahara in Africa, and it feeds in the Sahara on the edge where there's a wee bit of vegetation, lays eggs, completes the whole life cycle that we went over, and then as it starts to get a bit too warm, it flies to the south of Europe, and it does the same again. And then it moves a bit further up Europe and it does the same again. And every time the things get a bit too warm, the nectar plants start going, the food plants start dying, it just travels up and has another lot of young. And eventually it comes into the UK. Now, sometimes that's where it stops. It doesn't go any further north. But in some really good years, it goes much further, even up to as far as Iceland. And then what it does is it waits for a nice bit of cold and high air current coming down from the far north, basically the first breath of winter coming in. And when it detects that, it flies and it spirals high up into the air. And then it drifts. It simply puts its wings out and glides on the air current. Now, at the Sahara, there's a wall of warm air. And when the cold air hits the warm air, the butterflies fall out of the cold air and they end up back just outside the Sahara. And then they start all over again, lay more eggs, and slowly venture further north. But then they come back in a very short period of time. They just literally fly up high and just glide all the way back to the Sahara. And they wait until they hit this warm band of air, and it just drops them out of the air current. They've been basically surfing, and they fall back to the ground again, and you see them coming back. So they're doing very well. They feed on thistles as well, and their numbers are up. So they're doing well. And we've had a few really good years from them in the last little while. And certainly it was a couple of years ago where they were breeding all over Scotland. We sometimes don't breed in Scotland. We sometimes get the last lot before they fly up high and go back. But we've had in a few years lots and lots of them breeding in Scotland. So they're doing really well. And you've got this butterfly, the comma. Now, this butterfly is now found throughout Scotland. 10 years ago, it wasn't in Scotland. It'd been in Scotland before, and then it declined. It used to feed on hops and nettles only. See the theme with the nettles, but this one also used to feed on hops. And then, as we've kind of got rid of a lot of natural habitat, we also stopped growing hops as well in the UK to a large bit. This butterfly shrunk all the way back to the very south of England. But this butterfly had a plan. It was able to survive down there for long enough, and it started to learn how to feed on elm trees and willow trees. and others. And then now it's rocketed back up the UK again. It first started breeding in Scotland around Dunblane sort of area. And then it's spread all the way. I believe there was sightings up to Orkney, Shetland this year, or at least Orkney. I'm not quite sure if it got to Shetland, but it's up to at least Orkney, and it's overwintering now as well, and it's breeding quite successfully. Caterpillar is great. It looks like a bird dropping because, like, what other bird is going to eat a bird dropping? So hence the white splat, curls the head in, looks like a white splat. Don't eat me, I'm just a dropping. And this is where it gets the name from, is this white marking. It looks a bit like a comma, so that's the name. I love the wings. You can see how it looks like a dead leaf. And that's basically what I was trying to do, is hiding in the leaf litter and going, oh, look, I'm a dead leaf. Don't eat me. A lot of things that butterflies do is about not being eaten. And as I said, one of the main things to do for everything else in the environment is to be eaten. So they try as much as possible to avoid that, but usually a lot of things have learned their tricks, unfortunately, for them. I could put in this close-up picture in here, because if you look very carefully, you can see there's lots of little squares that make up the wing. And these little scales that make it up, they are scales. They're little squares and they are scales. And these scales kind of protect the wing underneath that. There's a kind of more a kind of membrane that's underneath that's quite solid actually. And what these do is you see if it flies into like a spider's web, the little bits of glue in the spider's web stick to the scales, pull them off. And okay, the spider's caught a load of scales, but it's not caught a butterfly. The butterfly's off because the scales just fall away. Or if a predator tries to get them, again, they get hold of the scales, and the scales are thought not to taste very nice and are quite dry and horrible. So by the time the poor bird goes, oh, what was that? The butterfly's well away. And again, as I said earlier, tried to get them to bite the wing in the first place, and partly to do that. And there is a moth called the garden tiger that takes it a step further with bats, and it's actually got its wings. They're a bit like a stealth fighter jet. So bats scream at their food, and the scream bounces back. And when you hear the bounce back, they go, I know who you are. And that's how they catch them in the dark. And as the scream bounces back quicker and quicker, they know I'm getting closer and closer. So this moth, in fact, quite a lot of moths actually try and have this bit so it doesn't bounce back. It absorbs the sound instead. So the bat's like, oh, there can't be anything there. I can't hear anything coming back. But sometimes the bat can still hear it. So what this garden tiger does is scream very loud back at the moth, or back at the bat, sorry. So the moth screams at the bat, and the bat goes, oh, what was that? And by the time the bat has paused and looked around, the moth has shut his wings and just dropped to the floor. And the bat's looking around like, where on earth did that go? And what on earth just happened? And it doesn't get eaten. So they've got some very, very clever things. But this butterfly doing very well. It's almost 100% increase in the amount of area in the UK that it's in. So very positive story. I've actually seen more of them than the small tortoise shells. So a butterfly that wasn't in Scotland, the one that I used to see with my gran that was the go-to butterfly, I've hardly seen, and the one that wasn't even about back then, I have seen a lot more of, which kind of shows you how things are changing quite a lot. And then in my grand's generation, these were all called the cabbage whites, and they were all kind of, it's all surely the same thing. They're not. They're actually at least three species. Well, we know in Scotland, three species. Down south, you've got other cryptic species, and it starts to get confusing. But Scotland, three. We've got small white, large white, and green veined white. And the green veined one is quite obvious. It's got loads of green. The veins of the wings are green. So when you see the underside of the wing and it's got lots of green lines, green veined white, and you'll usually get quite a strong tinge of green even when it's flying. So you can usually tell that one not too bad. Large white tends to be a very big butterfly, and it tends to glide. So you tend to see it do two or three big flaps of the wings, and then it glides, and it kind of glides downwards, and two or three flaps, and it goes up again, and it kind of glides about the place. Whereas the small white tends to fly a lot faster, but you can get very small, large whites that do the same thing. So the key thing to look for is the amount of black. So if it's got like black right round the outside of the wing, and it's very clear, and you see it when it's flying, you see these big black marks, and especially if it's got multiple black spots, large white. If it's got kind of more worn black and it's only really in the corner or maybe down one side, that's a small white butterfly. Actually, that's probably about for these common butterflies. That's as hard as identifying them gets. The whites are the sort of the hardest, but they're not too bad. When you see them more and more and you get to know how they fly, you actually begin to be able to pick them out and go, that's that one, that's that one. So you do pick it up as time goes on as well. So there's a three species all feed on brassicas, which includes like cabbage and stuff, hence why they were called cabbage whites. They were always a bit the gardener's pest. They are actually one of the more common butterflies now, but unfortunately they are all declining. So they're all down by between 20 and 30% in both their abundance and their distribution. So again, they're going down. They will feed on things like this. If any of your gardeners, you'll have seen this. This is one of the bitter cresses. You'll find that in about every garden as a weed. But it needs quite a lot of that. It's a small plant. So it tends to be a lot bigger of the brassicas. And again, they're things that are taken out as weeds in more intense farmland. They're taken out, and there's just not a lot of room being left for these things to grow very well quite often. So some of their better food plants, they're just maybe not getting them. And then they're under other pressures that we'll talk about later. Climate change is one of those. So it's not one thing that's maybe making them decline. It's sadly multiple things. And then you've got these. These are the meadow brown. The top one is the meadow brown with its wings shut and wings open. And then the ringlet with its wings open and wings shut there as well. I just didn't realise I had them the different way around, but there you go. And you can see the ringlet's got these nice little dots, and it's got nice little dots on the wing. It's going for multiple eyes. Look at all my eyes. They're all over my wings. And then again, you can see a very clear eye on the meadow brown. And these ones feed on a whole variety of grasses, and they have a very novel solution to laying eggs. Most butterflies will land carefully on a plant, like those white butterflies. They know a lot of the brassica family of plants has a lot of defense chemicals in them. And the defense chemicals are actually things that why we like eating, like cabbages and things. The taste is actually defense chemicals. So often the ones that we breed for eating are the worst for the butterfly. It's quite often why if you do have them in your garden, if you put nasturtium next door, nasturtium is more friendly for the butterfly caterpillars to eat. So it would rather go for them. And you actually see large whites landing, and they've got like little sensors in their leg where they'll test what chemicals are in the leaves, and they'll go, yeah, I don't want to lay an egg on that. It's not going to be nice for my young to eat. I'm going to go and find another one. And they're quite selective, and they'll lay a wee group of eggs. Or things like the orange tip will be still quite selective and lay one egg. These two, they just zoom overhead the grass. They know their larvae, their caterpillars, can feed on all types of grass. So all they do is drop the eggs everywhere. They can carry several hundred eggs, and they just simply bomb them over the grassland because they'll probably land next to a bit of grass that they can eat. So they just lay hundreds of them and scatter them out. And yeah, predators might find some, but there's so many of them scattered about, they'll never find them all. So you'll see these flying over the meadow, and they literally are dropping eggs. They're just bombing them as they go, and you'll see them on a sunny day all just flying around, and that's what they're all doing, is dropping eggs everywhere. But again, they do need a nice little bit of nectar, but for them, the thing that they need is some shelter. So if it's very, very short grass, it's not something that something they'll struggle with. They're needing a bit of longer grass, and actually a bit of longer grass that they can overwinter in as well. It's not the adults that overwinter for this one, but I'm trying to think what it actually is, whether it's the caterpillar or the chrysalis for this one. I've can't actually remember. I think it's a caterpillar, but they need shelter. They need long grass that's not disturbed, so grass that's regularly cut, and they also need shelter to bask in as well. As an adult, they have to keep it down, be able to bask a bit, but be able to get out of the wind and the rain as well. But a lot of these, the surprising thing is the abundance, especially the ringlets, going up. So where they are, their numbers are going up, but the number of places they are is going down slightly. So that's the one thing, is it's shown that there is some places doing really well for them, but they're not maybe spreading out and getting so kind of widely around the area there. And then you've got things like this. This is a small skipper butterfly, looks a bit like a moth. The only real way to tell is you see the kind of thick clubby bit on the end of the antennae. I'll try and point it out in one of the other ones as well. Moths don't have a club. They just have a kind of straight bit. It might get a bit thicker near the end, but butterflies have a very clear club at the end, and that makes that butterfly. Actually, outside of places that are not Britain and were never in the British Empire or under British influence, they don't call things butterflies and moths. They call them something usually on the lines of the Latin name, which is Lepidoptera, which means wings of scales or scaled wings, which is what they have. And they just put them all together. And basically, butterflies are a group of moths, and that's what they are. But if you were affected by the UK, if you live in the world anywhere affected by the UK, we decided that we were going to split it into butterflies and moths. And there's not a sort of scientific reason for doing that, really. That's just something that we thought about doing in Britain for some reason, and nobody quite knows why. So this species is new to Scotland. It's now as far up as Stirling. It's coming up the east faster than the west coast, but it is spreading up. It feeds on a whole variety of grasses, and it lays its eggs in the wee blade of grass. And then its larva will actually stitch up the grass and even punch into the grass stem, and that's where it overwinters. So it hides in the grass stem and overwinters. Now, this brings about a bit of a change in when we're thinking about managing wildflower meadows and grasslands, because normally what we do is we cut them at the end of the year because you don't want young trees establishing in a grassland because it becomes a woodland eventually, and you don't want too many thistles establishing or dock leaves. You want to keep everything in balance, so you actually have to graze it with animals or cut it with a lawnmower or do something. But we're now thinking, oh, actually, we better leave some areas standing because if we take it all away, where's this butterfly going to go? Because it's in the grass. We can't take all the grass away because we'll lose the butterfly. And actually, there's a lot of moths that did that, so it's possibly something we should have all thought about a little bit sooner. But this is butterfly sort of bringing it to our attention in Scotland in many ways. Um, but even saying that, a huge range increase northwards, it's actually been lost from a load of sites down south, and especially into Wales and the west coast, it would seem. It's been lost in a whole load of sites, maybe becoming unsuitable for some reason, and maybe they're having to follow as climate's changing. They're having to race northwards to try and stay in what they call a climate envelope, and basically the little window that is not too warm and not too cold for them, and they can stay in that not too warm, not too cold window, and they're having to move up the country as that window is changing for themselves. And then we've got this one, also brand new for Scotland. I only saw it for the first time this year, and I have it in my garden now. This butterfly was dotting around the borders of Scotland, but not really coming in. And then, wow, suddenly it's exploded and it's come in. And up to 5 years ago, there was odd record, but the last 2 years, it's just exploded from the borders. So last year, it reached Aberdeen. It went from Edinburgh to Aberdeen in a single year. It does have two generations, so it has a spring one, so it has adults in the spring that then lay eggs, hatch out as a caterpillar. And they actually feed on berries of various plants. So the spring ones like holly berries and stuff as they establish, and a whole load of garden plants. And the autumn ones do the same in the autumn, really like ivy berries, and they overwinter in the berry. The caterpillar overwinters inside the berry before coming out again as another adult as well. And you can actually see the wee egg here, wee nice spiky egg laid on the berry. Egg hatches, and you see this little spiky thing here? That is the caterpillar, who will actually make a nice little hole in there. So if you have a look at ivy at this time of year, you might find nice little holes in the ivy flowers, or where the berries are forming. And if you see a nice round hole, it's a holly blue, and it's going in and it's eating inside the berry out. And eventually it gets quite a bit bigger. And it makes friends because, as I'm saying, moths, butterflies, the number one thing in the environment they do is get eaten, and they don't want to be eaten. So they recruit bodyguards, this being ants, usually. So a lot of the blue butterflies and quite a few of the other ones do this as well, and they have little bits on their body where they can release sugar. So they release lots of sugar. The ants come along, the ants get the sugar, the ants are quite grateful, and the ants really don't want anybody taking their sugar source away. So the ants will then fight to protect the caterpillar. And actually, the ants are quite clever. The ants will do this with aphids as well, and they do a thing called farming, which is, as it sounds, They will find the best part of a plant for their little herd of other insects to live on, where they can produce the most sugar. They will take them to that bit of the plant. They will help them graze away quite happily and eat. And they will produce lots of nice sugar for the ants, and in return, the ants will look after them. So the ants actually do farm other insects, and other insects are quite happy with that because they get protection out of it. One of the big predators of butterfly moths is parasitoid wasps. And these are wasps that lay their eggs inside of the caterpillar, that then eats the caterpillar and the inside and emerges out of the caterpillar, kind of bursts out sort of horror film style. So it is one of the major ways. They're actually very, very important because it stops anything in the natural world, any insect getting too common. If we didn't have these parasitoids, things would get too common. They would eat too much of their food plants and even kill them. And we see that in commercial forestry and stuff, where, and even in crop fields, where because it's such a simple environment, there's not enough predators, and therefore they just erupt in huge numbers. All these things have evolved to lay huge numbers of eggs, and if their predators are not there to eat them, they just take over. So these parasitoids are so important, and that's why a lot of them have spines that's to fend off the parasitoid wasps coming in. And they are very, very clever, the parasitoid wasps, to the point like the large white butterfly I showed you. There's a wee tiny one that's about 2 millimeters long. Male and female butterflies meet through pheromones. The female releases a scent, the males pick it up. So you can always tell a male moth because it always has feathery antennae to catch the pheromones, and it's got big feathers coming out the front. So you can tell male and female. The females have straight antennae, and the males have these big feathers. Catch the pheromone, and then they will. That's how they go. They then go and follow it. That's how they'll get to the female. Well, the wasp has learned to do that too, and the wasp will come along and hide under the female's wing, hold on to her fur, wait until she goes away to lay her eggs. When she lays her eggs, the wasp will hop off and go and lay its eggs inside her eggs. They're very, very clever. So this holly blue has gone up a huge amount in them. It's, abundance distribution's gone up. Those numbers are not accurate. Actually, they were taken in 2020. It's well over double that now, I would say. It's this year, it's just everywhere. So it's doing very, very well. And this will be a butterfly if you're looking any sort of gardening area, but even holly and ivy at this time of year, holly in the spring, have a look for the flash of blue going over. Probably this butterfly. If it's got black tips in the wings, it's a girl. If it's got none, it's a boy. So it's one of the few you can tell the boys and the girls apart as well. And this is the butterfly we started with. This is the purple hair streak. Now, this butterfly, the map doesn't do it much justice because it spends its entire life flying around the tops of very big oak trees. It doesn't normally come down to the ground at any point. It lives up in the oak tree. The caterpillars feed on the oak leaves. The butterfly doesn't feed on flowers. It feeds on what aphids produce, aphid dew or honeydew. And basically, aphids, when they're sucking all the sugars out of a plant, there's always a mix of sugars that they don't want. They're just after one or two really good sugars, and the rest are like, I don't want them. So they literally just get rid of them. They squirt them out, basically. They just get rid of them. And the butterfly comes and drinks it. And quite a lot of other insects do as well. And that's what the purple hair streak is on. So they're just about to finish flying now, but they should be there for another week or so. So you're passing an oak tree, especially if it's sunny, especially if it's a sunny evening. Have a look up for a wee butterfly flying around. You might just get a wee glimpse of purple. What you often see is this little orange dot. I mean, you've got wee tails at the back there, and you're thinking, geez, the dot is tiny. It's right at the base of those tails, but it's designed again to catch a bird's eye. So actually, when I'm watching them down below, you will often see this orange dot really clearly from quite a distance. So definitely, these are everywhere. They're very, very under-recorded because who spends 50 minutes staring up at oak trees? I do. But I recommend it. People do give you looks sometimes. But we have learned something recently. And when you get the first storms of the winter and all the wee tips of the oak tree branches fall to the ground, and if you pick them up and have a look for that little white dot you see in there, it's actually a wee white spiky dot. That is the purple hair streak egg. And since we've started doing they've actually been found right up into the northeast of Scotland and right up towards Inverness. because they are not easy to see as an adult, but you can. So if you're under an oak tree in the winter, have a look for a little white dot up by the bud, because what happens is the caterpillar comes out that egg and then it drills into the bud and eats inside of the bud out. So if you have a look, it's usually settled right in a little kind of cranny there, and that is where the egg can usually is. So it's well worth looking for, and you'll find them quite commonly. And I guarantee that all of you will have walked under these butterflies this year. They are. I once did a survey and we went out looking for them in 82 sites and found them in 81. And they were not known in almost all of them. But you did have to sit and spend a lot of time underneath oak trees. And it was a very good year for them, I have to say, as well. This is one of my favourites. This is, I shouldn't say I have favourites really. My favourites change depending on what I'm doing, but this is one I've been working with a wee bit recently. So this is high on my list at the moment, and this is called the Northern Brown Argus, mainly found in Scotland. Only feeds on this plant, rock rose. The butterfly is a real pain to see. It only comes out in very, very bright, sunny days without clouds that are of a certain temperature and no wind. How it survives in Scotland, I do not know. But instead, when we survey it, we go looking for the eggs. And it always lays one egg almost dead centre in the rock rose leaf. And the eggs are very obvious. Nothing else lays an egg on rock rose like that. So you can walk around rock rose and look for these wee spiky eggs. And then there you go, there's your butterfly. And I've spent years helping with some surveys, especially up into Perthshire. And last year was the first time I'd actually seen the adults in the survey. I've come across them a few times by accident, but all the time I spend walking around in their habitats looking for them, I've only once come across adults. So they just like to hide. They come out very quickly, lay their eggs, and then go and hide again as soon as a cloud appears in the sky. So they like what they call species-rich grassland. This is like all the really kind of what we used to have. We had a lot of old hay meadows, less agriculture, less grazing. We're losing a lot of these grasslands, and rock rose is very tricky to grow. It's very sensitive in a lot of ways as well. But we've had some huge surveys, so it's down by about half. But we've had some huge surveys, and we've found lots of little remnants of them in lots of bits of Scotland. So some of these empty circles have now been filled. They're still there in quite low numbers. And there's lots of projects up and down the country. There's a big one in Stirling area, and there's one in Edinburgh that's looking, and many more, in fact, and some down here in the Solway, that are looking at planting in more rock rose, getting lots of members of the public, community groups. We've even got some guide groups, scout groups as well, growing rock rose. And then we can plant it out and help connect up all the little patches and put them back in touch with each other so they're no longer isolated. Because when they're isolated, and if maybe only a handful of individuals, you can have things like all the boys get eaten one year, and then that's it. And there's none left. So it's very important for them to be able to move around, and also so they can kind of mix their genetics up so that they remain healthy. So it's very, very important. They can all interbreed. So that is one we're doing a lot of work for, a lot of surveys. Same with this one. So this is the large heath butterfly, maybe the first one I worked on really properly. And this is a peatland specialist. It is only found in bogs. You only get it in peat bogs, and you really do get it nowhere else. Feeds on cotton grass, all these cottony bits of grass. This one with all the dots is the one found in England. The Scottish one actually has less dots. And we think this is something to do with the dots kind of, they don't absorb light maybe as well or something, and the butterfly needs more energy in Scotland, or needs to absorb more light. So it has very few in Scotland, and actually as you go north, the butterfly gets less and less dots, so you can actually tell how far north the butterfly comes from in the UK depending on how many dots are on the wing. But if you look at the map, you can actually see there's lots of these white circles. It has been lost from an absolutely terrific amount of sites. But a lot of that was historic from peatland draining, and actually a lot of the remnants have stayed. And you'll see the abundance is up by 407%. This is a little bit artificial because we've all started surveying for it. So it's we are finding a lot more of them and we're counting a lot more of them. So yes, its numbers are going up, but we're also counting more of them. But it's also probably genuinely going up in a lot of sites because we've got, especially in Scotland, we've got the Peatland Action Fund, which is trying to restore our peatlands because they store huge amounts of carbon, helps protect against climate change. They also store huge amounts of water, so it helps store against flooding, and a huge amount of our wildlife rely on them because they're always wet. In very dry weather, plants need lots of water to make nectar. And because bogs always have water and they have lots of flowers on it, like heather, late in the year when it tends to be warmer, that is the number one place for insects to go to survive. They need nectar from plants. So they're very, very important. And we use this as an indicator species because if we have a bog in a good condition, we'll find that butterfly. And the main thing we're trying to work out is where it's been lost, and we're now being able to restore these bogs is how do we get it back? So how do we restore networks of bogs to try and get it so it can come back? So this one is still in a quite a bleak way and it'll be affected by climate change, but we're doing something about it and we are able to do something about it. And we're seeing that effect. I saw a bog that had been restored and saw 1,000 of these butterflies in 45 minutes, which is unheard of. And that's something you read in kind of old books going back to Victorian times. So it is possible we can restore these things. And then we've got some of these brilliant butterflies, the fritillaries. We've got 4 of them in Scotland: dark green, pearl, small pearl, pearl, and marsh. The marsh at least looks a little bit different. The other 3 look very similar. However, the pearl border one comes out in April, May. Small pearls kind of after that. It can be out the dark green one, but the dark green one is very, very green underneath. And actually, if you look in the wings, there's a little change in the numbers. There's looks like a number 3. It always looks like number 3 to me there in the wing. Whereas the small pearl border has a number 0. So there is little changes. This is really where the butterflies get to their absolute hardest, as with some of these. But these were very, very common butterflies in Scotland, and they are still much more common in Scotland than in England. But unfortunately, they have struggled. So you've got Marsh Artillery, which actually its UK stronghold is the west coast of Scotland. And there's lots of work being done there to try and get farmland back to having more flowers because they feed on a flower called Devil's Bitscarius. And they feed on it in big webs. The caterpillars make big webs and they feed on it. And you see it out in a lot of the islands, particularly Islay. And we're actually now starting to discover there have been little colonies found in the Dumfries and Galloway area where they were thought to be extinct. So they're actually kind of hard to find if you're looking for the adults again. You really need to look for these what look like big spiders' webs with caterpillars in them that are on this Devil's Bitscarius. And now we're looking for that. There is little colonies. And again, we've been able to expand them and starting to manage them. And there's reintroductions being done in various bits down south. And there's various remnant colonies that are starting to be joined up. So again, it's down a bit, but with a lot of work, it is recovering. It can get there. A lot more to do, but it's getting there. We've just got a few more of the Scottish butterflies. I've not done them all because they're so many. I had to try and choose, and I got spoiled by choice. I was like, how on earth am I going to choose some? Because they've all got great little stories. But this one is one we're particularly always been looking for members of the public to help with, and we're looking for everybody to help with. This one's down by about 74%. It has a lot of these dots in England and Wales are now gone. Scotland is a stronghold, and unfortunately, we are finding in Scotland we are losing it. We've just had a big survey done because a lot of sites have not been checked for 10 years. It's not there. And we actually think it's now extinct in Glasgow City Council area. We don't think it's there. There's one site that needs to be checked, and hopefully it's maybe still there. But the other 3 or 4 that were left, nah, they're not there anymore. And actually, the habitat's changed to a point they won't be back either. So this is one we've really got to do something with. It feeds in marsh and dog violets. So we've actually got lots of people growing them up, and we're doing lots of habitat work to try and restore the sites. But the first thing we need to do is find where they are, because if we don't know where they are, we can't save them. So that is what we're trying to do with them. They need a lot of nectar source, but they also like to bask as well. This is one that's like it's like the ringlet in the middle brown. It likes to hide in bad weather, but also it doesn't like it the whole area to be tall grass. It likes a nice flat area so it can come and put its wings out and use them as solar panels and get a little bit of heat in it as well. So it needs a grass area that's tall bits, short bits, tall bits, short bits, flowers, and also some violets. It's picky, and it needs that to be able to survive. I actually took this slide from something else. This is the Glasgow survey, and all the sites around here were checked, and there was nothing found. So it's actually thought to be extinct in this area. I'm hoping there might still be a site up here, but we're not sure. There's a handful of them around here, but a lot of these have been lost. So we'll be running this for the next few years, and we're asking people to go out to all these spots, and we're doing it in various other bits of Scotland. And also people see the butterfly to report them. There's a survey page online, and to let us know where they've seen them. And there's these things called LBAPs in Scotland, or local biodiversity action plans, that the councils and local government particularly work to conserve nature. And a lot of them get mentioned, and there's a lot of commitment to conserving these. But the number one thing is, where are they? So we're actually working with a lot of the councils to do that now, and that's what we're always looking for volunteers for, to go out and have a look at these sites, and also to grow the violets as well, because this is how we're going to be able to save this butterfly and hold it in the UK. So why are they declining? Well, I've mentioned some of the things. Climate change, big one. Use of pesticides. Unfortunately, we had these things called neonicotinoid pesticides that are still used in forestry in the UK, but not in agriculture. They are very nasty to insects, and they get into ground and water and can be there for a long, long time. And they can very quickly wipe out whole populations. So unfortunately, they've had a big effect. Other pollution we know is having an effect. Loss of habitat is one of the things, losing where they can live, where their food plants, their nectar plant is, but also this thing, habitat fragmentation. And this bottom diagram here, you've got patches of habitat, which is maybe fine, but they might not be able to move from one patch to the other. And what we've got to do is make sure we can connect up the patches, or put in little islands so they can hop from one to the next to the next. But sometimes, like that northern brown Argus, if you put a whole load of tall trees, like a kind of Sitka spruce commercial forestry, in between two patches, they find that very difficult to get around. So you would need maybe some sort of corridor going round or over it. So the more and more as we use our landscape for lots of different things, there's less and less wild areas. We are seeing more and more things getting isolated and eventually wiped out. And butterfly populations are usually made up of what they call meta-population, a large population, and there's lots of satellite ones all around. And if the one population dies out, individuals can come from the other one and recolonize. So that happens quite regularly for perfectly natural things. But if the colonies are not connected up, all that happens is you just lose them all bit by bit. And then one of the last ones you'll see, I've got a picture in here of some soil. And one of the things that we're asking people to really do is to use peat-free soil and compost, and try and get plants that are in peat-free soil and compost. The small bear bird fertility is on the edge of peat bogs. That large-head butterfly only in peat bogs. So when people buy peat, to get it, they strip all of the vegetation off, drain all the water out, suck it up with literally big hoovers that go in the back of tractors, and that's what we sell in the garden centres, etc. But that's gone. Now, a metre of peat takes 1,000 years to form. So for every grow bag, and largely kind of a metre worth of peat in that, that's 1,000 years. So it's not something we can replace realistically. So every bit we lose for good. But luckily, we do have good stocks in Scotland, and we can do something about it, and we are seeing things being done about it. But we still see people digging it up to sell it, and we really don't want to be doing that, because so many of our butterflies and moths rely on these habitats. It's also releasing more carbon, because the peat then rots when people put it in their garden, releases carbon into the air, which drives more climate change, which then affects the butterflies again. So it's like a double hit, that one. So that's a definite no. And I've put this butterfly in. This is the mountain ringlet. It's found in Scotland in the Lake District only. And literally it likes quite a cold area, and it is having to race up hillsides to get to the colder and colder places. It may be adapting a little bit to go for slightly warmer places, but the question is, will it adapt? Will climate change slow down enough, or will it hit the top of the mountain and not be able to go anywhere before it can adapt? and we lose the species. So we are seeing it going upwards and upwards. And the question is, will a change happen or will it run out a mountain? So that's a butterfly very much affected by climate change. It's probably one of the species most affected in the world by climate change. And we're lucky still to have it. And there's lots, as I say, there's lots that folk can do. Recording butterflies and moths is an absolutely fantastic way to do it. There's a whole system set up for recording them and lots of people to help. You can record them on the Butterfly Conservation webpage. You can use iRecord Butterflies or the iRecord app, where you can actually put in anything you see and you can record any species. And it goes to people who will verify the records. It'll go to experts that will verify the records. So even if you're not 100% sure of something, get a photo and you can upload the photo with it and send it in. And then the experts can correct the record if it's wrong. So you don't need to worry about getting it right or wrong. We'd rather people send it in. But you can also email the experts through the Butterfly Conservation webpage. They're called Vice County Recorders, old Victorian system of recording that we still use today, where the whole country is split up into these vice counties. And you can send it to that recorder and they will verify what they're seeing. But also check in and they will give you help, advice, and they just want to see more people recording. So if you're keen, they're keen to help you. And you can even borrow things like moth traps. And that's like Christmas morning every morning with a moth trap. You don't know what's in there. And we'll show you briefly some moths. And you can also take on things like butterfly and moth transects, where you walk them and just count butterflies and moths you see. And there's loads of training and workshops available. There's surveys in groups. So if it's something you're not too keen to do on your own, you feel you would like to get some experience or learn or see how it works, you can come along to these events and come out with a whole group of people. And there'll be people there that have done it for 40 years, and there'll be people that have done it there never before. So there'll be a whole range of people, and everybody's always very welcome. It's one of the reasons I got into butterfly and moths and butterfly conservation, because it's very, very welcoming. So do have a look at the website. You'll see lots and lots of events being run on there, and they're all free. And please do come along. And we also run conservation events. So we actually go out and we do things for butterflies and moths. We've got this excellent bog in South Lanarkshire that we'll be going to a lot this winter. And we are cutting, it's actually not far from Castairs. And the landowner is letting the landowner's late husband loved butterflies and moths and wanted this to become a nature reserve. And this was a bog that got covered in siccus spruce trees. So you can see one of our volunteers here cutting away the trees. We didn't make him do it all himself. We did then go and help him. And that's the log that he's sitting next to. And you can see we cleared this massive area. And this was one of the last sites for this little green hair streak butterfly. This is about the size of your thumbnail, bright green butterfly, one that people don't know we have in Scotland. Absolutely lovely little creatures with real personalities. They will fight anything that flies over their patch of blaeberry, be it a bumblebee or be it a magpie. They'll give it a go, and they'll go and try and hit it, and they'll literally just fly directly into it. They lay their eggs on blaeberry, and the male ones will defend it against anything, even people that stand too close. It'll have a go. It's determined to keep them. But this site also has a large heath butterfly that we talked about, and the small pear fritillary, and it actually has more butterflies than any other location in Lanarkshire. And we think there's a lot of rare moths there. Well, we know there is, and we need to do more surveys. So we'll be doing lots of events at removing trees in the wrong place. I know we always think we're planting trees, but there is such things as trees in the wrong place. So we also do some grassland management, and we also do some flooding where we build dams and we re-flood the bog because it should be wet, and we actually build dams. So there's all sorts of great conservation projects. Some of it's planting plants, some of it's raking grass off of meadows, cutting down trees, planting in plants, or even if you don't want to get out in the field and do as much of that, we're always looking for people to grow plants at home so that we can then take them and plant them out, or grow in plants and get the seed for us so that we can go and put that out as well. But also even raising awareness. I know that's myself speaking to yourselves just now, but there's various other volunteers out today that are standing in stalls and telling people the same sort of stuff in stalls and at events all over Scotland. And we can always do with more people to help in all sorts of ways, from to help to run it right down to just, to come along and cut a few trees down. And it does really make a big difference. On this site, as I say, Green Hair Shriek was down to a handful of individuals. Then we saw, I think it was over 40. So it down to, it was borderline extinction for the area, and we could bring it back. Same for the small pearl borer fertility. It's now got some of the best numbers on the site. So we can do stuff, and a lot of the time it's quite simple. And a lot of the time it is just dependent on how many people we can get out, really. So if you know other people that like to come out, or groups that would like to come out, or groups that like to do stuff, do get in touch. We also have this really good campaign that's on the Butterfly Conservation website called Wild Spaces, and we're asking people to sign up to have a wild space. Your wild space can be a plant pot, it can be it can be a window box, or it can be a whole meadow. Whatever bit of ground you have, or a group you know have, or if you know a guide group that's got some ground, or anything. You can take part in this Wild Spaces campaign, and you can create either wild flower meadows, or you can plant them quite formally with some nice garden plants, make a log pile for the butterflies to hibernate in, create short lawn mix. I think this looks better than grass. Grass is just boring when it's green and that. Imagine having that instead. You've got bits of purple and everything in it. I mean, that's far better. And that's all the key nectar resource for your butterflies and moths in there. That is so much better. And then you can have your long grass as well, and you'll have loads of butterflies and moths in there. So have a look at Butterfly Conservation website and the Wild Spaces page as well, and you can get all this absolutely terrific information that's on there and sign up to a wild space. And if you know any groups that would like to do that and have any grounds or school groups and things, we have got some funding. Some of the butterfly conservation branches have some funding, just small amounts, but enough to start a wild space. And we also know other groups that have plants and things that they can give out. So if you've got a group that's maybe interested, let us know. And we've got people that can come out and help as well. And we're actually trying to get a new member of staff that will just focus on that, probably in the wider Glasgow area, but probably a bit further afield as well. And basically, all of these things are good for plants for butterflies. The key thing always is to keep in mind the food plants. Some things do actually feed on honeysuckle, like the caterpillars feed on the honeysuckle. Bird's-foot trefoil, it is terrific. All the common blue butterfly feeds on that. A load of moths feed on that. So that is really good nectar plant as well. It's also got essential amino acids for the bees that the bees need for their young bees. So it's basically like their omega-3 that we get out of fish and stuff, or the bees get it out of bird's-foot trefoil. So you can plant some terrific wild plants that also act as food plants, but you can also, because a lot of people I think wildlife garden, it has to be messy and it has to be all these thistles, and no, it can be a whole load of plants you would recognise, and loads of herbs. Herbs are really good. Like that's rosemary, it's there. That's chives that have gone to flower. They can be really good. The fuchsia is really good because a lot of moths like it, and also the elephant hawk moth caterpillar will eat it as well. People think they're snakes, the caterpillars. I even had a vet once that said to me, these aren't snakes. I'm sure that's a caterpillar. What is it? And a lady kept bringing them in because she thought they were escaped snakes in her garden, but they weren't. They were just these huge caterpillars. And I have chucked in some moths. So what was it, 58 butterflies in the UK? Well, there's about 3,000 odd moths. So the moths win hands down. The butterflies have a tiny little group. The moths win every time. And there's what they call macro moths and micro moths. Usually the tiny ones are the micro moths, and then the macro moths are the big ones. There's a few that break the rule because there always is in these things, but usually that is. This is the elephant hawk moth. It's about palm size, feeds on your fuchsia, also feeds on the plant rosebud willow herb, the big tall pink thing that's putting seeds everywhere just now. That's the one. But you've got things like this, angled shades, that can travel all the way from the far side of Europe into the UK. It can fly terrific distances. We ermine moth as well. That feeds on, if you see big webs around trees and bushes with lots of caterpillars under it. There was a thing at Wick Stirling a few years ago where all the hedgerow was covered in a thick sheet of web with caterpillars under it. And they even covered some of the sheds in the car park with the web. And that was this moth that did that. You've got the cinnabar moth as well. It's warning colours because it absorbs some of the toxin from the ragwort that it feeds on. And it basically kind of goes, birds don't eat me because I'm poisonous. We've got this lovely moth that's spreading into Scotland, feeding on horse chestnut, and you'll see it most of central Scotland now. And if you look at a horse chestnut this time of year, and you see all these these kind of little lines, kind of light coloured and then going brown, kind of going up the lines of the leaf, that's a horse chestnut leaf miner. And a whole load of moths And you can find moths year round as well, and some as adults year round. But moths have a whole group that are called the leaf miners. And what they do is they don't want those parasitoid wasps to inject eggs into them. So what they do is they eat out the middle of the leaf. They hide between the top of the leaf and the bottom of the leaf and eat the middle bit. And they leave all these crazy patterns. Some look like a squiggle, some look like a blister, some look like a snake. And these are all moths that are living inside the leaves. And a lot of the time, you know the plant and you know what it looks like. If it's a squiggle or if it's a kind of square or what the pattern's like, you can tell straight away what the moth is. So it's called leaf mining, and it's becoming quite an exciting thing for people to do with moths. It's quite fun doing the winter and the autumn. You can record a lot of species that are very hard to do as adults, so you can do them so easily. And you've got things like this. It's a Malvel du jour or Marvel of the day, and it looks like a little bit of lichen. You've got lattice teeth, which are a really nice kind of grassland one. But you've also got this, and it isn't a hornet or a wasp. It is the lunar hornet, which is one of the clear wing moths. So it actually loses all the scales off its wings when it emerges, and it pretends to be a wasp. Because again, less things tend to eat wasps because they sting. So it's basically saying to the birds, look at me, I have a stingy thing. Look, I'm black and I'm yellow. Warning sign, don't touch me, I'll sting you. That hasn't got a sting at all. It's totally harmless. But the birds don't know that. But this is called the lunar hornet. And there's actually quite a few moths like this, and they look just like wasps, but they're not. They're actually moths just hiding. Just a bit of dress up. And there we go. Thank you very much for listening. And you see some of my contact details there. There's my email, but you can also contact the Butterfly Conservation in general on the kind of web page and Butterfly Conservation Scotland. Do check out the web page. There's loads of stuff and loads of resources on the web page, so do check that out as well. You can see I've got a wee list of credits at the bottom for all the people that I've sort of borrowed photos from to be able to put all them in. That's another thing that's very useful to have volunteers doing, is if you're very good at your photography, yeah, if you don't mind us using your pictures, because that is so important for engaging with people. And yeah, basically, I've got a whole team of people there that their thing is photography, and they've gone out and they've taken these great pictures, and it helps us show all the butterflies and moths to people. So I'd say thank you very much for listening. Contact details there, and please do get in touch with anything. But if there's any questions just now, happy to take questions too.